Welcome to week 4 of our discipleship series. This is 4 of 4. So if you have missed 1, 2, and 3, then you can find them. They are linked in a playlist floating around somewhere. But we've been thinking about discipleship and looking for practical application. I've said in all of these previous communications, I think discipleship is kind of in the spotlight at the moment. There's a lot of information around, there's a lot of opinion around. I have only added to the opinion, but there are some really great things around. There's some really strong resources around, there's some really brilliant opinion around, and there's some awful stuff around too. So I thought it would be helpful for us to understand some of where we are coming from as communities. We lead with make disciples. That's a significant and leading part of our vision and mission statement. We want to make disciples, include people in the kingdom activity of God, invite people to know Jesus and bless people. And we lead with that statement of making disciples, and that's an informed decision that we make in that. And I think in the swirling exchange of ideas and information, it's going to be helpful for us to engage with some things. And you will know from, if you have connected with the other 3 ideas, that we're kind of skirting the edges of some things. The idea of discipleship being there are some paradoxical elements to it. There are some things that feel relatively simple and some things that feel potentially quite complicated. And so to avoid getting lost in the weeds, actually we want to see the value of the direction of travel. We want to see the value of creating the path in that, rather than getting lost in we're brushing up against along the way. And so we're using this really simple idea of faithful obedience to Jesus. If we're going to boil discipleship down to anything, then that's not a terrible place to start. Faithful obedience to Jesus. And we need each other for that, and we need the Bible for that, and we need the presence of God for that, and we need the Spirit of God for that, and many, many other things that we will talk about, I am confident, in other days. But I need to round this conversation off for us today. I need to bring us to a point. We are thinking about application rather than information. I'm aware of the irony in how that has transpired. We're thinking about our character formation by our proximity to the presence of Jesus. Remember, we want to see his face and hear his voice. We want to be the people developing an appetite to know who he is. That speaks to who we are and then how we interact with others. We have the evidence of the fruit of the Spirit of how we are getting on with those first couple of things, with how faithful and obedient are we to Jesus? How is my character being formed and shaped in the presence of God? Galatians 5 gives us some clues around that, the fruit of the Spirit. And so really in kind of summary, that's where we are up to. And so this week, this communication, how do we do that? How do we tie all of these things together? Does it matter? Do we care? What do we do about that? And I am really excited, and this whole series came from John 15, and spending some time in John 15 and thinking about the words of Jesus in John 15. And we could spend the rest of our time on earth in John 15. We're not going to do that, but there is just a ferocious amount in John 15 that it deserves our time and attention, and it deserves the time and attention that this style and format of communication just cannot afford. It's not meant to. That's not what this is supposed to do. So if you are wired this way and this is exciting for you, then please go and gather people and have a look at John chapter 15 and study it and pull it apart and look at what you find along the way. But I want to introduce just some headline ideas to us this week to help us kind of bring all of these ideas together. The paradox of discipleship in Matthew 28. How do we go? How do we make disciples? How do we baptize and teach? The character formation that happens in my proximity to the presence of God. The evidence of those things from Galatians 5. How do I do that? Abide. That's going to be important for us today. It's going to be significant for us to think about. So I'm going to read John chapter 15 verses 1 just through to verse 11 for us today. Again, it's worth so much more of your time and your investment, so carve out some space for that this week. But let me read this for us, and then I will lift out a couple of things that I hope will help us join some of these dots and be excited about following Jesus, about the invitation to follow Jesus, and the way that the balance of what feels like effort and the expenditure of our energy changes when I think we can grab a hold of some of these things. So John 15, 1-11 say this. This is the words of Jesus, Jesus speaking. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he's thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. Oh my gosh, there's so much just in those 11 verses. But I have to bring us to a point. I have to bring us to something that we can focus on and do something with. So I want to lift out just a couple of things that I think are going to be helpful for us. Jesus is very deliberately choosing this language. It perhaps feels obscure to us. I don't know how often you are interacting with vineyards. You might be interacting with the produce of vineyards frequently, but that's a different conversation. But I don't know if we pick up on first pass some of the significance here, and that's nobody's fault. That's not accusatory in any way, shape or form, but just through the layers of what's happening here, it's perhaps not as obvious to us. So we need to help understand some of that. There's symbolism running all the way through these things. Jesus is not saying these things accidentally. Remember, everything that Jesus says is on purpose. Everything that we receive is curated on purpose. It's telling us something. This has been compiled with just supernatural levels of skill and intelligence and brilliance, and that it's not an accident that these things are here, is what I am saying to us. And so it's helpful for us to understand that grapes, so let's start with grapes, symbolize the people of God and their faithfulness and their fruitfulness in doing God's work on the face of the earth. So that would have been known and understood symbolically for the hearers of this. Grapevine, vineyard, however your translation has presented it, but the vine is a symbol of God's covenant people. And you can pick that up all over the Hebrew Bible. You can spend some time in Isaiah, you can spend some time in Ezekiel, you can spend some time in Psalms to pick up these themes and to help see and understand that Jesus is using imagery that would have been familiar to people and is telling them a story. So when he says, I am the true vine, that would have had an instant impact for people. That meant something. We also need to be aware of, it's just helpful for us to understand that in the time and place that this is given, there would have been a golden vine outside of the temple, again as an association, a symbol of the people of God. So for Jesus to say, I am the true vine, is saying that actually the way to follow me, the way to God, the way to be about my business requires an attachment to me, to Jesus, not to perhaps things that have gone before, that maybe there is a different way to think about that for the original hearers of this message. But then by association for us, what are we invited to in there? And I want to help us connect with this by saying discipleship is an invitation to connection. There's something that happens in verse 9 that is mind-blowing for me. I hope it is for you as well. It says this, Jesus says this, "As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love." That is wild to think about, that the creator of all things, the same way that he loves Jesus, the unending, unbreakable, unshakable, incorruptible way that the Father loves the Son, so Jesus loves us. That is phenomenal to think about, that the dynamics now of discipleship have totally changed, because there is this invitation to connection in the vine, in the imagery that Jesus is using here of where does the provision come from? Well, to produce any sort of fruit, which is the command and the call from Jesus. And remember, we are assessing the fruit from Galatians 5, and we are looking for fruit as evidence of our faithful obedience to Jesus. We've been on this journey for a number of weeks, and this is what kind of brings it all together. It's Jesus's words from John 15, that there is a requirement for those who know and love Jesus to produce the fruit of Galatians 5. Well, that's only possible in and through Jesus. So there is this mutual connection that needs to happen. Discipleship is Jesus extending an invitation to connection, to say, if you abide in me, the same unshakable, incorruptible, unbreakable, unending love that the Father has and has demonstrated for me, that's how I love you. And so if you will abide in me, I warned you at the beginning, abide was going to be our key for today. We need to think about abide and what that means and how that shapes how we understand and how we interact with all of these things. When we choose to remain in Jesus, when we choose to have an attachment to Jesus, when we choose to focus on who he is, when we choose to live our life with him first in it, and we have heard these things and we are dismissive of these things because it's so easy for things to find another way to supersede the ways of Jesus. Jesus will not insist upon himself in that way. It's a free invitation for you to choose to remain. How often do we choose to wander from the connection that we have in Jesus? And I'm just going to figure it out in my own way, or I don't like the way that this has been done, or I don't like the way that that makes me feel, or I don't like the demands that that places on me, or I don't want to observe an internal rhythm and requirement, responsibility, the privilege of being the disciple of the one who created all things, who spoke things into being, who sustains all things, who is the radiance of the glory of God. The same one calls us into this unending, unbreakable, incorruptible relationship with him. And our response to that is we can choose to abide in it, or we can choose to wander off. And we have to be encouraged to abide in it. We have to be encouraged to stay the course. We have to be encouraged in the face of inconvenience and pain and resistance and other things that we could do and other investments that we could make and other priorities that we could have, to place them all in the right context of saying the one who is the creator, the sustainer, the inheritor of all things calls us into this unending relationship, evidenced from the Father to the Son and made available from the Son by the Spirit to his body. That's us. That's us. That's the invitation that we have. Discipleship is not the repetition of religious behavior. Discipleship is not the religious repetition of Sunday at 10:30. Discipleship is not the religious repetition of reading verses in obscurity and sticking them on our fridge or having them as reminders on our phones. Hear what I'm saying, because I understand sometimes those things are helpful for us, but if we are doing those things without an attachment to Jesus, they're a waste of time. We have to do them with an attachment to Jesus. We have to abide in him. We have to see and understand this call that we are given is to respond to this unending love that has been seen from the Father to the Son, and by the Spirit, the enabling of the Holy Spirit poured out on all, that we are all made available, that it's not the limits of tent or tabernacle anymore. It's not about the temple presence. It's not about a people group in a place, in a time, that Jesus has said, I am. He is the fulfillment of all of those things. I am the true vine. Don't look to the symbol outside the temple. Don't look to the things of habit and of ritual. Don't look to the things of heritage or geography. Don't look to the things of behavior or externalizing these things. There has to be an attachment to Jesus for any of this to be worthwhile, for any of this to make sense, for any of this to be worth doing. Otherwise, it's just a branch that will be gathered and will be burnt. There's nothing that we can do of eternal significance outside of Jesus. There's nothing that we can ask for that is of any value outside of Jesus. As soon as we sever that connection, then Jesus has made it very clear that it's of no value. There is no value outside of the source of life. It comes from a connection, an attachment, a dependence, a necessity, an overwhelming desire to be with Jesus. That is what our discipleship has to look like. That's the path that we are walking on. That's why we cannot get distracted by the weeds that we encounter along the way of how and what and where and when and why. We will figure that out as we find him, in following him, in our desperation and our attachment to him. And if you don't feel the enthusiasm of that attachment to him, ask him. Ask him. It will not be through an external behavior. It will not be through somebody a bit further down the road teaching you a new habit. It will not be the confirmation bias of a celebrity. It will not be through a new thing that you can acquire. It will not be through escapism. It will not be through hedonism. It will not be through mysticism. It will not be through Gnosticism. It will be through an attachment to Jesus. It will be about remaining connected to him. It will be about abiding in his love. His unending, unshakable, incorruptible, unbreakable love for you is an invitation to connection. He has made himself available to you. His face can be seen, his voice can be heard. That there is a call for you as an image bearer. We are garden people. We are people of Genesis 1, that we are commissioned and called to the garden, to where heaven meets earth, to this space where we and God occupy this shared space. And as his image bearers, as his representatives on earth, there is a requirement for us to look like him. And the only way that we can do that is our attachment to him. If you haven't got an attachment to Jesus and you want one, ask him. Ask him for that attachment. Ask him for that overwhelming dependence on him. He will not fail. He cannot let you down. He is unbreakable in his commitment to you. It's evidence from the Father to the Son, and then through the Spirit to you and to I, for his body, for his glory, for his kingdom to be seen, for people to encounter joy, for people to see hope, for people to hear the words of redemption and renewal and light and life and the goodness of God, for people to engage with the fruit that comes from the vine. Jesus is the true vine. There is no other way. There is none other. And so look for that attachment. I have gone on too long. The point of this series was that it was short and sharp and to give us something to think about and talk about. So that is what we need to do now. We need to think about it and talk about it. And I want to encourage you to action that in this moment, to be brave, to send that message, to look to your group. If you are in a group as you are watching this now, brilliant. Connect with each other, as awkward and uncomfortable as it might be. Make that conversation happen. What does that mean? What does John 15 teach us and tell us about discipleship as an invitation to connection? And what do we want to do about it? How do we respond to that? Speak with each other about that. Reach out, bring somebody else into that conversation. Look to connect with those that you know maybe are a little bit on the periphery of community. Bring them into that conversation. Invite them in, feed them, treat them well, look after each other as we work out what Jesus is inviting us to be connected to him, the true vine. I hope this series has helped. Rewatch it, share it, connect with it. If you've missed any weeks or have been kind of up and down with it, reach out. I would love to talk with you about any of it if you want to do that. Be brilliant, go well, and we will see you really soon.